An old woman, thin, grey-haired, worn down by years in a cold stone cell, stands before the execution block. Her name is Margaret Pole. She is 67 years old. But when the executioner orders her to kneel, she refuses. She looks him in the eye and tells him to do it himself. That if he wants her dead, he'll have to take her head, because she won't lay it down. What follows is one of the most horrific executions in English history. It takes 11 axe blows. Why would such a brutal end befall a grandmother? What kind of woman defies the King of England with her last breath? And why did Henry VIII, one of the most feared monarchs in history, see this frail woman as a threat? To understand, we must go back to the beginning. Margaret Pole was born on August 14th, 1473. Her bloodline was as royal as it gets. Her father was George, Duke of Clarence, brother to King Edward IV and Richard III. Her mother, Isabel Neville, was the daughter of the kingmaker, Richard Neville. Margaret was born into a world of power and death. Before she was even 5, tragedy came in waves. Her mother died suddenly at just 25 years old. Barely 2 months later, Margaret's baby brother Richard also died. Then her father, once one of the most powerful men in England, was accused of plotting against his brother, King Edward IV. In 1478, George, Duke of Clarence, was executed for treason. By order of his own brother, Margaret Pole was 5 years old. She had lost her mother, father, and baby brother. She and her remaining brother Edward were orphans. And worse, they were royal orphans, with dangerous blood in their veins. After King Edward IV died in 1483, Margaret's uncle Richard III seized the throne. He removed Margaret and her brother from the line of succession. But that didn't make them safe. In 1485, Richard III was killed at the Battle of Bosworth by Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII and founded the Tudor dynasty. To secure his shaky claim to the throne, Henry VII married Elizabeth of York, Margaret's cousin. But even that wasn't enough. Margaret and her brother Edward still had a stronger blood claim to the English throne. To eliminate that threat, Henry VII locked 10-year-old Edward in the Tower of London. He would never leave. As an adult, Edward was implicated in a mysterious escape plot. He was executed on Tower Hill, likely beheaded in secret. That left Margaret Pole the last surviving Plantagenet, the last direct threat to Tudor rule. And the clock started ticking on her life. To keep her close and powerless, Henry VII arranged Margaret's marriage to Sir Richard Pole, a distant relative of his. It was not a love match. It was strategy. She gave birth to 5 children: Henry, Arthur, Geoffrey, Ursula, and Reginald. Her husband died in 1505, leaving her widowed and poor. So poor, in fact, that she had to borrow money from the king to pay for her husband's funeral. To survive, she made brutal choices. She sent her 2 eldest sons away to be raised by noble families. Her youngest, Reginald, she handed over to the church, abandoning both custody and responsibility. Some say this decision haunted her, that Reginald never forgave her. But then her fortunes changed. In 1509, Henry VIII became king and married Catherine of Aragon, Margaret's friend. Margaret was invited to court as lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine. She regained her family lands and was granted a generous allowance. By 1538, she was the 5th wealthiest noblewoman in England. But peace never lasted long in Margaret's life. Catherine failed to bear Henry a son. The king became obsessed with producing a male heir and turned his eyes to Anne Boleyn. When the Pope refused to annul his marriage, Henry split from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England, with himself as head. Margaret, a devout Catholic, refused to accept this. She stayed loyal to Queen Catherine. She hated Anne Boleyn. She rejected the king's new church. She didn't whisper her disapproval. She said it out loud, and that made her dangerous. Her downfall would come not from her enemies, but from her own son. Reginald Pole, whom she had surrendered to the church, grew into a brilliant scholar and passionate Catholic. He publicly condemned Henry's break from Rome. He called the king a heretic, a murderer, a monster. Henry VIII was enraged. He demanded Margaret force Reginald to stop. She wrote him a letter. Some say it was filled with sorrow. Others say it was drenched in fear. But Reginald did not stop. In 1537, Reginald was made a cardinal by the Pope. He called for the king's excommunication. He supported uprisings like the Pilgrimage of Grace. Henry VIII went ballistic. The king launched an investigation. Margaret's son Geoffrey was arrested and tortured. Under unbearable pain, he gave up names, including that of Henry Courtenay, the king's cousin and friend. Courtenay was executed. So was Margaret's eldest son, Hengry Pole. Geoffrey was spared. But Margaret was next. She was interrogated for 3 straight days. Sir William Fitzwilliam and Bishop Thomas Goodrich found her to be sharp, fearless, unbreakable. They called her more man than woman in strength. Even in captivity, she disturbed the Fitzwilliam household. His wife fled the house. Fitzwilliam wrote, "She disturbs my mind. Her presence alone unsettled people." Then came the final blow. Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's right-hand man and architect of the Reformation, claimed to find a tunic in Margaret's belongings, embroidered with the 5 wounds of Christ. It was a Catholic symbol of resistance. To Cromwell, it was proof of treason, but many believe the tunic was planted. A setup, a convenient excuse to get rid of a woman whose bloodline and defiance made her a constant threat. On that basis, Margaret was imprisoned in the Tower of London. For 2.5 years, she waited. Growing older, forgotten by most, still dangerous to one man. On the morning of May 27, 1541, Margaret Pole was told she would die in 1 hour. She was 67 years old. The regular executioner was unavailable, so a young, inexperienced substitute was brought in. Margaret was led to the execution block in the Tower of London courtyard. A small group of nobles gathered. No crowds, no fanfare, only fear. When ordered to kneel, she refused. "I am no traitor," she said. "If you want my head, you must find a way to take it." The young executioner panicked. His first blow missed her neck entirely, slamming into her shoulder. What followed was a blood-soaked nightmare. It took 11 axe blows to end her life. 11. A noblewoman, a grandmother, a daughter of kings, butchered like an animal. Margaret Pole's death was not justice. It was a message to every remaining Plantagenet, to every Catholic, to every voice of dissent. The message was, defy the Tudors, and you'll suffer. Ironically, Thomas Cromwell, the man who framed her, was executed just a year later. On Henry's orders, the Tudors devoured their own, again and again. As for Margaret's son, Reginald Pole, the one who lit the fire, he returned to England years later. After Henry's death, Queen Mary I made him Archbishop of Canterbury. He buried his mother in secret, as no grave had ever been marked. Margaret Pole died a traitor by royal decree, but she lived and died as something more, a woman who refused to kneel, a mother who lost everything, a royal who stood her ground, a Plantagenet who would rather die screaming than surrender her soul to a tyrant. And in the end, she gave Henry VIII what he feared most, a defiant memory that even 11 axe blows couldn't erase.